Good Friday, late afternoon, everyone. And to close the inaugural Empower Conference, we have a distinguished guest to share some insightful, inspiring closing comments. And to introduce him, I'm pleased to welcome Dennis Brownlee, an alumnus and trustee emeritus of Princeton, a retired media and entertainment executive himself, and now founder and chairman of the African American Irish Diaspora Network. Dennis, welcome and thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Don. I'm Dennis Brownlee, and I'm a member of the planning committee for the Empower Conference. And on behalf of Princeton and the committee, I would like to thank all of our panelists, sponsors, entrepreneurs, and participants for an outstanding conference. And now it's my distinct honor and privilege to introduce our closing speaker, Dr. George T. French, Jr. In 2019, French became the 5th president of Clark Atlanta University, the largest United Negro College Fund member institution, and the largest private HBCU within the state of Georgia. Prior to his appointment, French served for 14 years as the president of Miles College, making him one of the longest serving university presidents in the nation. A nationally recognized leader and influencer in higher education and educational policy, Dr. French has served 3 secretaries of education under 2 United States presidents as a congressional appointee to the National Advisory Committee on Institutional Quality and Integrity. He earned his BA in political science from the University of Louisville, his JD at Miles Law School, and he has a PhD in higher education from Jackson State University. As president of Clark Atlanta University, Dr. French's notable achievements include exponentially exceeding all fundraising records in the history of the university, maintaining stable enrollment in the midst of a pandemic, and developing corporate and community relationships to position the university for unprecedented growth. These accomplishments as a nationally recognized leader in higher education align closely with the conversations and challenges we have discussed over the past 2 days of the Empower Conference. President French, thank you so much for joining the conference and sharing some closing perspectives with us. And now, Dr. French.
And let me first thank you for the kind introduction. And I certainly enjoyed our preliminary behind the scenes introductions and conversation, and to glean the excitement of the conference was absolutely gratifying to me. And what an action-packed 2 days in celebrating Black academic entrepreneurship. Listen, I'm deeply grateful to Princeton Innovation for having the foresight to holistically address this topic. This is a viable topic in expanding and building our Black entrepreneurial ecosystems. Our entrepreneurial ecosystems are vitally important to who we are as a people, where we are as a nation, and where we find ourselves today. So as I sit in Atlanta, Georgia, as I sit on the beautiful campus of Clark Atlanta University and the AUC Center, the same hallowed ground where Martin Luther King walked, I think about Martin Luther King Jr. as I studied him, and I studied him since I was a child of 16. And I remember he asked the question, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? And that's what I asked to this august body today. What's next? Where do we go from here following this dynamic 2-day convening, following this confluence of brilliance, this confluence of academicians and entrepreneurs and innovators? Where do we go from here? During this 2-day conference, we discussed launching startups by examining technology transfer and we examine accelerators, funding sources, and Our panelists also address funding startups through leadership, funding strategies, and venture capitalist opportunities. And finally, you recall that our experts delved into scaling your startups through industry partnerships, key industry partnerships, and building Black, again, entrepreneurial ecosystems. As we think about the next steps, I turn my thoughts to philosophy. I am a student of philosophy. And as a student of philosophy, I believe that the basic premise of philosophy can be an influential tool for successful entrepreneurship. Aristotle, great philosopher from which entrepreneurs can learn a great deal. Yes, in 2021, we can reference back to Aristotle because he believed we are embedded in a material world and that philosophy starts by studying that world. Philosophy focuses on improving our understanding of humanity, of how we evolve as individuals in a society. You will recall, scholars, that Aristotle actually tutored Alexander the Great, and his philosophy had a literal impact upon the world and world events. That's also the reason why I genuinely believe Aristotle is a good philosopher, again, for entrepreneurs to study. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking for someone to study, yes, we look at the contemporary entrepreneurs, but study and consider Aristotle. Reid Hoffman, an internet entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and author, noted, he said, one of the things I've said about entrepreneurship is that it should include an embedded theory of human nature. If you develop a theory about how human beings identify themselves, connect with others, view themselves to be part of a group, and pursue a theory of the good, the conclusions you reach can help. They can help you design a product or service that appeals to people on a fundamental level. Yeah. Let's bring it closer to home. Clark Atlanta University is proud to note that its entrepreneurial legacy extends back to the intellectual genealogy and philosophy of W.E.B. Du Bois, who served as a professor of economics and sociology right here in the late 19th and 20th centuries. Scholars, I believe that Dr. Du Bois' focus on economics and enterprise was the introduction, or dare I say, preamble to the establishment of Clark Atlanta University School of Business Administration. Dr. Du Bois was also known as the father of innovation due to his leadership with a pioneering team of Black sociologists in creating data visualizations that explained institutionalized racism, even back then, to the world. Dr. Du Bois was a man ahead of his time with his creative genius, intellect, and philosophy. And as I continue to study more and more about Dr. Du Bois, I am amazed at the foresight and vision that he had back then and how that philosophy is relevant even now as we build our Black entrepreneurial ecosystems. Clark Atlanta University has already set the stage for entrepreneurial success stories in our alumni. Our school has produced and continues to graduate a large number of African-American MBAs every single year. Our undergraduate program is one of the top 10 producers of African-American business professionals in the entire nation. Our graduates enjoy leadership and management careers in public and private sector organizations throughout the country and, yes, the world. We've also produced a substantial class of entrepreneurs who are providing jobs and services, not just for our nation, but for the world. And as I reflect upon some of our alums, I think of Pinky Cole. Pinky is one of our top graduates and entrepreneurs, the owner of several successful slutty vegan restaurants here in Atlanta, and Stacy Lee, her friend and comrade, the owner of the craft beer, you heard it, Harlem Hops, right there in New York. And what struck me about these entrepreneurial young women, sisters, alums, and friends, is that they paid it forward and joined forces to eliminate the financial barriers that have prevented and would have prevented 30 CAU students from graduating just a couple of years ago, just before COVID. They both embodied the CAU motto, I'll find a way or make one. Colleagues, the global workforce is becoming more and more competitive. I don't have to tell you. And the landscape is fertile to equip our young scholars with the tools to become successful entrepreneurs. We must prepare our students to acquire wealth by creating their own businesses. Momentum is Clark Atlanta University's theme for the year, momentum. And with that momentum, we've adopted an entrepreneurial mindset towards the way we operate and execute academic and administrative activities and engagement. That's our mindset. And I believe that it's incumbent for Black faculty at CAU, as well as in other HBCUs and non-HBCUs, to lead societal impact and positive change, both in the classroom and outside the classroom. Collaboration between academic institutions and industry. There we are. Collaboration between academic institutions and industry is paramount for us to realize the vision for a future of equitable access for underrepresented academic entrepreneurs. Clark Atlanta University is already leading the pack in creating opportunities to grow the Black entrepreneurial ecosystem by helping to close the wealth gap. Recently, we established a partnership with Operation Hope's 1 Million Black Business and Entrepreneurial Initiative, which will enable us to mold and mentor future entrepreneurs. CAU's Dynamic Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurial Development provides our students and faculty with many of these tools, skills, and opportunities, including startup incubation. We are focused on startup incubation. These entrepreneurs need a place to go, and they need a strong support system, and we're there. Each year, our center hosts hundreds of students who pitch their startup ideas, kind of like Shark Tank, and enter creative hackathons in search of early stage funding so that they can begin in earnest their generational wealth building journey. Colleagues, I could go on and on about what we're doing at Clark Atlanta University, how we embrace entrepreneurship, how we embrace innovation, and how we embrace creativity in the development of this ecosystem. Over the last 2 days, we've outlined the steps toward that goal. Let us continue toward the goal of closing that wealth gap. Let us continue to be purveyors of the truth and create new opportunities actively. In closing, I return to the prophetic philosophy of Dr. Du Bois when he said, now is the accepted time, not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. It is today that our best work can be done, and not some future day or some future year, but today. Colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to present to you, and I will stand ready for questions should you have them.
President French, all I can say is amen. Thank you so much for that deeply thoughtful, scholarly, and inspiring perspective on entrepreneurship. You've given us a lot to dissect as we think about going forward. You posed an important question at the beginning of your remarks that frames the key issue as we conclude this conference. What's next, and where do we go from here? You also talked about the imperative to consider entrepreneurship within the context of philosophy. As we look at where we go from here, what are the important philosophical tenets for building a sustainable Black entrepreneurial ecosystem?
So that was, you packed a lot, you packed a lot into that question. Okay, but the framing, especially toward the conclusion of the conference, is very important. What's next, and where do we go from here? I think it's simplistic in nature. It's simplistic in appearance, but it's complex in nature. I think that even for my students, for my 4,000 students, the focus not has to be only a liberal arts education and preparing to go work for NCR or Southern Company or one of the multinational companies right here within the city. But the focus has been and has to be upon, there was a song a while ago, you may not remember. It said, mama may have and daddy may have, but God bless the child who has his own. And what we are understanding as we disaggregate the data within the African-American community is that we have to not only be consumers, but we have to produce products. We have to be entrepreneurs that we don't go to work every day for someone else. And this young generation, the generation today, they are not interested in just going to work for someone else. They want multi-generational wealth. Multi-generational wealth, as the data clearly indicates, does not develop by working for someone else. Multi-generational wealth would become a product of entrepreneurial spirit, of innovation, of creativity. So we have to put within the mindsets of our student scholars, when they enter the academy, it's okay to be non-traditional in approach. You don't have to graduate in 4 years with a liberal arts degree and go work for someone else. You can develop your own business, your own passion. And as I said earlier, even when I think about A.G. Gaston in Birmingham, his basic tenet and philosophy was to look at a community, define what the needs of the community were, and to meet those needs through entrepreneurship. And that's the mindset that we have to instill into our students as we move forward, understanding the philosophical tenets of liberal arts, but also understanding that we must evolve to meet the needs of the current marketplace.
Mm-hmm. So, that brings us back to the Clark Atlanta University motto, I'll find a way or make one. And during the conference here, we've heard from other thought leaders who echoed this philosophy in various ways. which also represents the willpower and determination that have characterized Black achievement and innovation in America in the face of lasting oppression. Can you tell us a little more about how this philosophy translates into your partnership with Operation Hope's 1 Million Black Business and Entrepreneurship Initiative?
Excellent question. And you know, to contextualize it, when we talk about finding a way or making one, oftentimes the young people, they look at Clark Atlanta University, the beautiful campus, expansive landscape, beautiful buildings, laboratories, academicians walking everywhere, scholars challenging them. And they would have imagined that an institution like this had its genesis, its origins in a perfectly aligned society. A society which said to African Americans, yeah, go ahead, start that university. When in fact, as a student of history, I reflect right here in Atlanta, Georgia, when the Army of Tennessee was descending upon, which was the Confederate Army, descending upon the Union Army here in Atlanta. William Tecumseh Sherman descended upon this city and I believe, if I'm correct, the date was about November the 15th, 1864. After they had sacked Atlanta, Sherman burned the city to the ground in his historic March to the Sea with a scorched earth policy where he burned everything, personal and public policy property on the way. Left behind a city of Atlanta, which previously had 22,000 inhabitants, which went down to 3,000. So there was basically no one in a city of ruins. Yet 5 months after the surrender of the Confederate Army at Appomattox Courthouse, 5 months later, this institution was established. So what I'm saying is that we were not established in 1865 under optimum circumstances, but the city was on fire. We had to find a way or make one. And the entrepreneurial spirit says that there's no perfect time when your funds are right, when your family situation is perfectly aligned, so you understand your wife or your partner's resources and income and yours, and when can I step out to make that dream come true? There will be no perfect time. Sometime the house will appear to be burning down when you have to have the nerve, gall, and audacity to step out and say, I'm taking responsibility for my family and for my community, and I'm going to start that dream and that business, because in some situations and instances, it's now or never. That is the genesis and epitomizes the I'll find a way, I'll make one spirit that we have here at Clark Atlanta University.
And the time is now, absolutely. And you spoke so eloquently about the need to emphasize and promote entrepreneurship as a means of building equity in the Black community and closing the wealth gap. And I'd like to ask you to comment a little bit further on why we need to bring a sharper focus to the fundamental importance of entrepreneurship in the context of public policy and the overall social justice and civil rights movement in this country.
So again, being a student of history, and particularly a student of Martin Luther King Jr., I understood very clearly the parameters within which Dr. King, and I know his family well, I knew Daddy King, Bernice to this day. If you look at what Dr. King did in making these major social justice and civil rights moves and demanding equality and equity in our nation, he was just fine with some people. Some sectors of society said that we can stomach that, let the Black folks stay over there and march and demand rights. and all of that, and the right to go and sit down and have a hamburger at the counter. But when he started talking about two things is when his life became endangered. One, of course, was the Vietnam War. And the other was when he started talking about economic empowerment. When he started talking about being in the boardroom, when he started talking about the fact that we need equity within our society, when he started talking about having parity in economics and African Americans starting their own businesses and being responsible for themselves, because when Martin Luther King and Abernathy and Andrew Young, Ambassador Young, and all of those icons, when they were on the battlefield, the reason they were able to be sustained was because at that time, the Black church was the only independent organization. The larger community could not come in and shut down and fire the pastor. They could do it for private businesses. They could fire individuals who voted and tell their family, if you vote, you're going to be fired. The leverage that we had during the civil rights struggle was that our leaders were employed by the Black church. And what I would submit is that as we become more and more independent, individually and as a race, we can speak out about social justice issues more. I can speak out about social justice today, knowing that I'm going back to Clark Atlanta University and they have my back. That board of trustees, they have my back. The community, they have my back. If I'm working for a large multinational corporation downtown, they might come in Monday morning and say, George, you need to stop all this talk about social justice and equity. And then I have a situation where I have to go and tell my wife, baby, we may not have food on the table next week if I don't close my mouth. That's why we need entrepreneurs who have their own, and they like Pinky, like I said, Pinky Cole and Stacey Lee, they can step out and help our students because they're not in danger of anyone saying, we're going to shut down your business. Because the more individuals say we're going down to shut down your business, the more the Black community comes and support those businesses.
Economic empowerment leads to true social justice. So I have one final question for you. And that is, momentum is Clark Atlanta University's theme for this year. What momentum would you like to see other academic institutions take from this Empower Conference in partnering with Clark Atlanta University and the broader HBCU community in building the Black entrepreneurial ecosystem?
So the question is multidimensional because, and I really do appreciate the question because you actually hit on something that is not emphasized enough. And that is what, in my quarter century now in higher ed, been a president, one of the, like you said, one of the longest serving presidents in the nation, Black or white, with the average tenure of HBCUs presidents now being down to 5 years to 6.6 years, which is dismal. We aren't in these positions for long. So for me to be in a position for 17, going on 18 years now, it's anomalous. But what I've discovered is that when I wake up in the morning, I'm not asking the question, how do I compete with Howard, or Morehouse, or Spelman, or Oakwood, or Hampton? When I'm waking up, what I've discovered is that if I wake up in the morning, not competing against those institutions, but pulling the strengths of each of those institutions together to collaborate, then we don't walk in the room saying, these are the 6 institutions that are vying for that small piece of the pie, and we're wondering who's going to get the small slither of the pie. Those days are over. Now I wake up in the morning calling those presidents, literally we do this, asking the question, how can Howard University's medical program interface with Morehouse School of Medicine and their medical program, with Clark Atlanta University's cyber-physical system, with everyone else to collaborate to put together a proposal for which we walk into the room and not walk out with a slither or a piece of the pie, but with the whole pie. And I would say that's where we are as a community of academicians. And we take from the Empower Conference that we should partner versus collaborate. We take from the conference that we do better if we find the sharpest people in the room, and instead of trying to, as we say within the community, hate on them, asking the question, what are your greatest resources? These are mine. How can we strengthen ourselves? That's what I take from this Empower Conference, is that as this huge contingency, this, and if parenthetically, if you put together all of the HBCUs, we would be within the 200 of the Fortune 500. We would be about 200 if we were to combine our resources, which would be much more powerful, much more resourceful than several countries of the world. All we have to do is stop competing against one another, get away from the crab mentality of as soon as you get up there, I pull you down, to say, let's all come up together. Let's empower one another. That's my closing message, empower.
Fantastic, fantastic. President French, we commend your leadership and entrepreneurial spirit at Clark Atlanta University, and we so appreciate the insights that you shared with us today. On behalf of Princeton University and all the sponsors and attendees of the Empower Conference, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm now delighted to ask Rod Priestley to return and to officially close this year's inaugural conference. Thank you, everyone.
Greetings again, everyone. My name is Rod Priestley, and I'm the Vice Dean for Innovation at Princeton. I would like to offer my sincere gratitude to President French Jr. and Mr. Dennis Sprawnley for a remarkable session to close out this conference. Thank you, Dr. French Jr., in joining us from the beautiful campus of the Clark Atlanta University, an institution formed literally as the city was burning, as you noted. Thank you also for the history lesson. Your comments were truly inspiring, including the importance of philosophy and the liberal arts and entrepreneurship, as well as the comments on the vision of Dr. Du Bois to advance Black economic outcomes. And I can personally attest to the statement that CAU alum will find a way or make one. I would again like to offer my sincere thanks to the organizers and sponsors of Empower 2021, as well as to thank all of the speakers and panelists for their insightful words. Earlier today, Ken Chenault described leadership as defining reality and inspiring hope. This conference was put together in part because the reality is that the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem is not as inclusive as it should be. We are not living up to the ideas of responsible innovation as was defined by Ken. And this is in fact detrimental to innovation. As noted by Professor Joe DeSimone in the second keynote, we learn most from those with whom we have least in common with. And homogeneous teams are at a disadvantage with regards to creating ideas and innovating. Yet I am optimistic that this conference has inspired some level of hope in all of us. One of my favorite poems is, "I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day," by Guest. Therefore, I am personally hopeful that Empower has encouraged us all to lead by action and has opened up new opportunities for us to work together in building a more inclusive innovation ecosystem. Thank you for attending Empower 2021 and best wishes on your innovation journey. Thank you.